Welcome to the store. Don't forget to subscribe, and support me.
Lena stood on the edge of the cliff, the winds roaring around her, the ancient storm staff gripped tightly in her hands. She could feel the power pulsing through it, the raw energy of the storms bending to her will as she concentrated, her mind a swirl of thoughts and emotions. Below her, the land was a wasteland, scarred by centuries of relentless storms, the landscape twisted and broken. The clouds above churned with fury, but for the first time in a long while, Lena felt a flicker of hope. For generations, humanity had been driven underground, hiding from the wrath of the storms that ravaged the surface. The elders had taught her that the surface was no place for humans anymore, a barren world where the very air crackled with magic, and the skies never ceased their fury. But Lena had always wondered, always dreamed of something more. Now, with the ancient storm staff in her grasp, she had the power to change that. The journey to this point hadn't been easy. Lena closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. It felt like a lifetime ago when she first discovered the ancient map, hidden deep within the archives of the underground city. The elders had dismissed it as a relic of the past, a foolish pursuit. But Lena had been driven by a deep, unshakable instinct. She couldn't accept that humanity was doomed to live beneath the earth forever, clinging to survival in the dark caverns. She believed that the world above was not lost, that it could be reclaimed, and so, she had set out, against the advice of the council, with a small group of companions, brave souls who shared her vision. They had traversed dangerous tunnels, braving creatures that had adapted to life in the depths. The journey was perilous, and they lost friends along the way. But nothing could have prepared them for the surface. The first time Lena stepped into the open air, the force of the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. The skies above were a roiling mass of dark clouds, crackling with lightning, and the ground beneath her boots felt foreign, unwelcoming, but they pressed on, following the map's guidance to the lost temple. Lena could still remember the awe she felt when they first saw it, nestled in the side of a mountain, its ancient stone walls worn by time and weather. Inside, they had faced challenges far beyond what they had expected. The temple wasn't merely a relic, it was a sanctuary of elemental magic, guarded by forces older than any they had encountered. The battle with the elemental guardian had pushed them to their limits, and Lena had feared, for a brief moment, that they would fail, but in the end, she had emerged victorious. She had solved the temple's riddles, unlocking the inner sanctum and claiming the storm staff, a weapon of immense power, created by an ancient civilization that once controlled the very elements. The staff hummed with energy in her hands, its power flowing into her like a river of lightning. But the weight of that power was not lost on her. She knew it could be used for destruction as easily as salvation, and now, standing at the edge of the cliff, Lena faced a choice. The power of the storms was within her grasp. She could calm them, reshape the world, and allow humanity to return to the surface. But she also understood the dangers. The storms had been born from magic that was far older and more complex than she had anticipated. There were forces at play that she couldn't fully comprehend, and the wrong decision could unleash even greater chaos. As she stood there, her companions gathered behind her, watching in silence. They had been through so much together, and they trusted her completely. Still, she could feel their uncertainty. They, too, were torn between the desire to return to the surface and the fear of what that might mean. "Lena," came a voice behind her. It was Tom, one of her oldest friends and the most cautious member of their group. "Are you sure about this? I mean, we've barely begun to understand what that staff can do. What if it's too much for us to handle?" Lena turned to face him, her eyes calm but resolute. "I'm not sure, Tom. But I do know one thing, we can't keep hiding underground forever. If we don't take this chance, we'll never know if the surface can be ours again. Tom frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. And if it goes wrong? Lena took a deep breath. Then we deal with the consequences. But I'd rather face the risks than live in fear for the rest of my life. Silence followed her words, the winds howling around them as if echoing the tension in the air. Finally, Tom nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Just, be careful. Lena turned back to the cliff, her heart racing. The storm staff pulsed in her hands, responding to her emotions, the magic within it eager to be unleashed. She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside herself, focusing on the connection she had felt with the staff back in the temple. Slowly, she raised it above her head, the energy crackling through her fingertips. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden surge of power, the skies began to shift. The clouds above swirled and parted, the storm winds easing as the staff's magic took hold. Lena could feel the elemental forces bending to her will, their chaotic energy becoming something she could control. It was overwhelming, exhilarating even. She could sense the immense potential of the staff, the way it could reshape the world around her, but she had to be careful. Too much, too quickly, and the balance could be lost. As she focused, the storms above them began to calm. The winds that had once been fierce and unrelenting softened into a steady breeze. The dark clouds parted, revealing patches of blue sky that hadn't been seen in centuries. Below, the land was still scarred, but it no longer felt hostile. The magic that had once fueled the storms was receding, tamed by the power of the staff. Lena lowered the staff slowly, her body trembling from the effort. The magic was potent, and it had taken everything she had to keep it under control. But as she looked out over the landscape, she knew that it had worked. The storms had been calmed, at least for now. Her companions gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You did it," whispered Erin, another of her companions, her voice filled with wonder. "I can't believe it, the skies," Lena smiled, though it was a weary smile. "It's only the beginning," she said. "We've calmed the storms, but there's still so much to do. We need to find a way to make this last. The staff's power is immense, but it's not a permanent solution. We'll need to combine its magic with our technology if we're going to restore the surface for good." Tom stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And you're the one who's going to lead us. We believe in you, Lena." Lena nodded, though the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She had taken the first step, but the path ahead was uncertain. The power of the storm staff was a gift, but it was also a burden. She couldn't rely on it alone. She would need to use her intelligence, her determination, and the skills of her companions to truly rebuild the world. As they made their way back to the underground city, the air felt different, lighter, freer. The storms had always hung over them, a constant reminder of the world's danger. Now, for the first time, there was a sense of possibility. The people could return to the surface. They could rebuild, reclaim the land that had been lost. But when they arrived back at the city, the council was less than enthusiastic. The elders had ruled over the underground society for generations, and they had grown comfortable in their positions of power. To them, the surface was a dangerous unknown, and Lena's actions were reckless at best. "You've tampered with forces you don't understand," one of the elders, a stern-faced man named Varek, said as they stood before the council. "The storms are part of the natural order. What gives you the right to interfere?" Lena met his gaze, unflinching. "The storms may be part of the natural order, but so is humanity's place on the surface. We were never meant to live underground forever. The staff gives us the chance to fix what's broken. Varek scoffed. And what happens when that power turns against you? When the magic you've unleashed spirals out of control? We've survived down here for centuries. There's no reason to risk everything now. Lena clenched her fists, frustration boiling within her. Surviving isn't the same as living. You may be content to stay down here, hiding from the world, but I'm not. And neither are the people who followed me. We have the chance to make things right, to reclaim the surface. We owe it to ourselves to try. The council chamber fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally, one of the older members, a woman with silver hair and a kind, weathered face, spoke up. Lena is right, she said softly. We've lived in fear for too long. Perhaps it's time we faced that fear and took a step toward something better. There was a murmur of agreement from some of the council members, though others remained skeptical. Varek scowled, but he said nothing more. In the end, the council agreed to let Lena continue her efforts, though they remained cautious. They gave her limited resources and warned her that if the situation worsened, they would intervene. Lena left the council chambers, the weight of their cautious approval resting heavily on her shoulders. She understood their fear, but it was frustrating nonetheless. They had spent so long hiding underground, clinging to safety, that they couldn't see the possibility of something better. But Lena couldn't let their doubt derail her. The vision of a world restored, of humanity returning to the surface, burned too brightly in her mind. Her companions, who had been waiting outside, fell into step beside her as she made her way through the narrow, dimly lit tunnels of the underground city. The air here was always thick, stale. It was a reminder of the limitations they had been forced to accept. But not anymore. Lena had seen what was possible above, felt the air that carried the hint of freedom in every gust of wind. She knew there was a future waiting for them on the surface, and she intended to claim it. We did it, Aaron said, trying to inject some optimism into the group as they walked. The council may not be throwing a parade, but they're letting us move forward. That's a win. Lena nodded, her gaze straight ahead. It's a start. But now comes the hard part. Tom, always the practical one, spoke next. We'll need resources. Stabilizing the storms permanently is going to take more than the staff. The council's resources are limited, and they won't support us fully unless we show them real progress. I know, Lena said, her mind already working. The staff can calm the storms, but it's a temporary solution. If we're going to bring the surface back to life, we need to combine the staff's power with something more reliable. We need to find a way to integrate the ancient magic with our technology. Tom looked skeptical. Do we even know where to start? Lena stopped, turning to face her team. We've come this far without all the answers. We'll figure it out. But first, we need to head back to the temple. There's more to learn there. The staff wasn't the only thing left behind. The ancients knew how to control the elements, and there are bound to be clues in that temple about how we can harness that knowledge. Aaron grinned. A second trip to the surface? I'm in. But you'd better believe I'm not going near that elemental guardian again. Lena smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She appreciated Aaron's attempt to lighten the mood, but the truth was that their next steps would be even more dangerous. The first journey had been about discovery, but now they were dealing with forces that could shape, or destroy, the future of their entire civilization. And Lena was keenly aware of how fragile that future was. As they prepared to return to the surface, the underground city hummed with quiet tension. Rumors of Lena's mission had spread, and people watched them with a mixture of hope and fear. Some were eager for change, yearning for the promise of a life above ground. Others whispered warnings of doom, convinced that meddling with the storms would bring about the end of what little security they had. Lena felt the weight of their expectations, but she couldn't let it slow her down. The truth was, there was no turning back now. The moment she had taken the storm staff into her hands, her fate had been sealed. The only path forward was to keep going, to push through the uncertainty and doubt and find a way to make the world whole again. The journey back to the surface was faster this time. The team knew the route well, and the threat of the surface no longer hung over them like a shadow. Lena had already proven that the storms could be controlled, at least temporarily. As they emerged from the tunnels and into the open air once more, the difference was immediately apparent. The winds still howled, but they were subdued, less violent. The clouds overhead were less thick, allowing beams of sunlight to pierce through in golden streaks. Erin stood beside Lena, looking up at the sky. "You did this," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "It's like the world is waking up." Lena didn't respond, though her heart swelled with pride. This was only the beginning. There was still so much more to do. They made their way back to the temple, the ancient structure looming in the distance, its stone walls weathered but still strong. As they approached, Lena felt a strange pull, an echo of the magic that had drawn her here in the first place. The storm staff thrummed in her hands, resonating with the power that still lingered within the temple's walls. Inside, the temple was just as they had left it. The air was thick with the remnants of ancient magic, the kind that made the hair on the back of Lena's neck stand on end. The puzzles they had solved, the guardian they had faced, all of it seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, it was time to delve deeper, to understand the full extent of the knowledge that had been lost here. Tom, ever the strategist, was already scanning the walls, his eyes searching for clues in the ancient inscriptions. "There has to be something here," he muttered. "Some way to stabilize the storms permanently." Lena ran her hand along the rough stone, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath her fingertips. The ancients had built this place for a reason, a sanctuary of knowledge and power. But the staff alone wasn't enough. There had to be more. Hours passed as they searched, scouring the temple for any hint of the key to unlocking the full potential of the storm staff. And then, finally, they found it, hidden deep within the inner sanctum, behind a wall that had seemed impenetrable, was a chamber unlike anything they had seen before. The walls were lined with intricate machinery, strange devices that pulsed with energy. It was a fusion of magic and technology, unlike anything Lena had ever imagined. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast space. "This is how they did it. They combined the power of the storms with their technology to control the elements." Tom's eyes widened as he examined the machinery. "If we can figure out how this works, we could use it to stabilize the storms permanently. We wouldn't have to rely on the staff alone." Lena nodded, her heart racing. This was the answer they had been searching for. The ancients had left behind the blueprint for saving the world, and now it was up to them to decipher it. The team spent days in the temple, studying the machinery, trying to unlock its secrets. It was slow, painstaking work, but with each passing day, they made progress. Lena could feel the pieces falling into place, the way the magic of the storm staff could be integrated with the ancient technology to create a system that would regulate the storms, controlling the elemental forces that had wreaked havoc on the world for centuries. But as they neared a breakthrough, Lena began to sense something else. A presence. The elemental guardian they had faced before had been vanquished, but there was still a lingering energy in the temple, something watching, waiting. One night, as Lena stood alone in the temple's main chamber, the air around her seemed to thicken. The hairs on her arms stood on end, and the storm staff pulsed in her hands. "You have done well," came a voice from the shadows, deep and ancient. Lena spun around, her heart hammering in her chest. A figure emerged from the darkness, a being of pure elemental energy, its form shifting and swirling like the storm itself. "Who are you?" Lena asked, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. The being's eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, fixed on her. "I am the keeper of the storms, the guardian of this place. You have taken the staff, and now you seek to control the storms. But you must understand, this power is not to be wielded lightly." Lena gripped the staff tighter. "I don't intend to abuse it. I only want to save my people." The elemental being's form shifted, its energy crackling in the air. "The storms are a force of nature, not to be tamed by any one person. You may control them for a time, but if you are not careful, the balance will be lost." Lena met the being's gaze, determination burning in her chest. "I understand the risks, but I have no choice. If we do nothing, the storms will continue to destroy the world. I'm trying to restore balance, not upset it." The being was silent for a long moment, its gaze piercing into her. Finally, it spoke again. "Very well. I will allow you to continue, but know this: the power you seek to control is ancient and dangerous. If you lose control, it will consume you. You must always remember the balance." Lena nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I will." The being's form began to dissolve, its energy dissipating into the air. "Good luck, Lena of the surface," it said, its voice fading into the wind. "May you find the balance you seek." As the being vanished, Lena felt the weight of its warning settle over her. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she couldn't turn back now. Too much was at stake. With the elemental's warning still echoing in her mind, Lena returned to her team, determined to push forward. They had come too far to stop now. Days turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly to unlock the full potential of the temple's technology. Lena could feel the magic of the staff growing stronger with each passing day, her connection to the elemental forces deepening. She knew the risks, knew that if she lost control, it could all come crashing down. But she also knew that this was their only chance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they were ready. Lena stood before the machinery, the storm staff in her hands, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment they had been working toward for so long. If they succeeded, the storms would be stabilized, and humanity could finally return to the surface. With a deep breath, Lena raised the staff, its power humming in her hands. She could feel the energy of the storm swirling around her, wild and untamed. But this time, she was in control. Slowly, she channeled the power of the staff into the machinery, the ancient devices coming to life with a low hum. The air around her crackled with energy as the magic and technology fused together, the forces of nature bending to her will. For a moment, Lena feared it wouldn't work. The energy was too chaotic, too unstable. But then, slowly, the storm winds began to calm. The clouds above parted, revealing a clear, blue sky. The air was still, peaceful. It had worked. Lena lowered the staff, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had done it. The storms were stabilized. Humanity could return to the surface. Her companions rushed to her side, their faces alight with awe and relief. "You did it," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena smiled, though it was a weary smile. We all did. As they stood together, looking out over the now calm landscape, Lena felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but they had succeeded. Humanity could reclaim the world above, and the storms would no longer threaten their future, but Lena knew that her work wasn't over. The balance was fragile, and she would need to remain vigilant to ensure that the storms remained in check. The elemental's warning still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the power she now wielded. As they began the long journey back to the underground city, Lena felt a sense of hope for the future. The world was changing, and they had the chance to shape it into something new, something better, and as long as Lena held the storm staff in her hands, she would protect that future with everything she had.